It's that time of year again, and to celebrate, we're going to be playing a game that we played not that long ago, but instead of looking at the showcase of the Immortals, we're going to be examining one of World Championship Wrestling's greatest and scariest pay-per-views there ever was. Because today... A big thank you to all of my wonderful Patreon supporters such as Inigo Montoya, Dakari Garment, and Rodney Harris. Thank all of you for the support, as it really does mean a lot. Alright, before we start playing, let's go over the ground rules. Now, the way this works is simple. I've broken down every Halloween Havoc card by category, just like I did for WrestleMania. But not surprisingly, the categories don't really break down one-to-one, as the two pay-per-views are pretty different. In any case, I'll be selecting my own personal favorite matches in each of these categories, choosing from all of Halloween Havoc history. And no, I won't be choosing from any of the NXT ones, in case you were wondering. And by choosing these favorites, I'll be using them to make my absolute perfect Halloween Havoc card. The only trick is, I won't be able to use any of the wrestlers more than once. So if I have any matches featuring certain wrestlers in particular, don't expect to see them later on in the card. Anyway, with all that being said, why don't we just get into it? When it comes to choosing a pre-show match for Halloween Havoc, this is definitely a touch harder than it was for WrestleMania, seeing that many of the bouts that happened before Halloween Havoc officially started tended to be dark matches, and the first Halloween Havoc ever didn't even get that. But WCW did briefly have a program that aired before pay-per-views. It was called Main Event. This show had been on since 1988, however, it wasn't until the mid-90s that WCW decided to use it as a pre-show for their big events on Sundays. And during this time, they did have some pretty good matches. However, if I was only going to choose one match, it would have to be Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit going against the Blue Bloods, Steven Regal and Bobby Eaton. Halloween Havoc definitely has a lot of great opening contests, however some of them fit into other categories that we're going to be using later. And so, I decided that when it comes to the curtain jerk match, I'm only choosing those that don't fit into any other category, so no title matches here. But don't worry, that still leaves a lot of great matches to choose from, but we still have to pick only one, and that one would be Yuji Nagata versus the Ultimo Dragon. Coming out of Las Vegas in 1997, these two put on an absolute fantastic match, which is not surprising since Ultimo Dragon in WCW was one of the very best. And even though he was no longer the J-Crown champion at this time, Ultimo proved that he doesn't need 10 titles in order to kick off Halloween Havoc the right way. World Championship Wrestling was definitely well remembered for its Cruiserweight division. However, that didn't come about until 1996. Although that's not to say that that was their first endeavor when it comes to dealing with lighter weight classes, as they did used to have a light heavyweight championship, which was first crowned at Halloween Havoc 1991 in a match between Ricky Morton, who was going by the name Richard Morton at the time, and Flying Brian Pillman. However, as good as that first light heavyweight championship match was, for me it wasn't quite as good as the first year that Halloween Havoc had a Cruiserweight title match, which saw Dean Malenko take on Rey Mysterio. Although as good as that match was, it's still not my top pick, because of course I'm going with Rey Mysterio vs. Eddie Guerrero, Las Vegas, Nevada, 1997. Not only is this the best Cruiserweight Championship match in Halloween Havoc history, but it's just one of the best all-round matches for Halloween Havoc that there ever was. These two put on an absolute masterclass, and this match is what solidified WCW's Cruiserweight division for being just as great as it was. And just look at it this way, this match was so good that it somehow managed to beat Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko from the year before. Now that's saying something. I don't think it would surprise too many people to hear that the NWA put more of a precedence on tag team wrestling than modern day WWE does. But to put that in perspective, the first Halloween Havoc ever had 8 matches on the card, and 3 of which were tag team bouts. Then moving on to the 12 matches of the second Halloween Havoc, 5 of them were dedicated to tag team wrestling, which is almost half the card in both cases. Now, If this trend had continued, I probably would have put on a non-title tag team category on this list. However, that wasn't the case. So instead, we're just going to be looking at WCW tag team title matches. And in this case, I had to go with the Outsiders versus Harlem Heat. These are two of my absolute favorite tag teams of all time. So if there's a match at Halloween Havoc that featured both of them squaring off for the WCW Tag Team Championship, of course I'm going to choose that as my one match. Now, an interesting note about this match and tag team psychology, a lot of people feel like the bigger stars are supposed to be waiting on the outside to open the match. But for this match, you'll notice that it's Booker T who started things off for Harlem Heat, despite being the bigger draw. And so, to rebound and build up the drama for this, Scott Hall spit at Stevie Ray to really get him good and mad, and this got the fans really hyped up to see the big man finally get his hands on the bad guy and give him his comeuppance. Next up, we have the TV title, and while there are several matches to choose from, including Johnny B. Bad vs. DDP, and Steve Austin vs. Dustin Rhodes, which I would have taken except it ended in a time limit draw, I'm going with Chris Jericho vs. Raven in Las Vegas, Nevada 1998. And personally, I would have picked this match just for the promo exchanges in the beginning alone. When it comes to Halloween Havoc and United States Championship matches, there are a whole lot out there. Now, we could go with Big Van Vader versus Nikita Koloff, or we could go with Kurt Hennig versus Ric Flair, which was really good except that it ended in disqualification. And then there's also Lex Luger, who was in both the United States Championship matches for the first two Halloween Havocs ever. But I won't be choosing any of those. Instead, we're going to New Orleans, Louisiana in 1993, and even though these two missed out on the television title match, they're getting chosen for the United States Championship. I'm talking about Stunning Steve Austin and the Natural Dustin Rhodes. And now on to the Gimmick match. And I know what a lot of you are thinking, but no, I'm not going with the Chamber of Horrors match. But I know a lot of you are expecting me to pick it, and if you like it, that's fine, but I'm definitely not going with it. Instead, I'm going back to the OG Halloween Havoc. I'm going with the first Halloween Havoc ever and the first ever Halloween Havoc main event. The Thunderdome match featuring the Great Muta and Terry Funk going against the team of Sting and Ric Flair, with special guest referee Bruno Sammartino. Not only was this a great main event, but it also served as a crucial part of the story between Ric Flair and Sting, which was all just part of the setup leading to Flair's eventual heel turn. And yes, I do know that it's kind of weird to have a dedicated category to gimmick matches, even though the main gimmick of this pay-per-view was to have a big wheel full of gimmick matches, but nevertheless I decided to go with one anyway. And I'm also aware that this was a main event match, even though I'm not choosing it for the main event category. And the match that I am choosing for the main event category was also a gimmick match. This is all a little confusing, but anyway, let's just move on. And last but certainly not least is of course the main event. However, which match do we choose? Now again, there were a lot of different matches to choose from, such as Lex Luger versus Ron Simmons, Goldberg versus DDP, and of course I could always go with Hogan versus Macho, which is never a bad showing. But if I have to pick just one WCW World Heavyweight Championship match at Halloween Havoc as the very best, well, I'm going back to New Orleans, Louisiana in 1993, and we're going with Cactus Jack versus Big Van Vader. This match was all the right kinds of brutal, and I say it's also the best example of spin the wheel, make the deal, which is a staple of Halloween Havoc that many of us hold in high regard. And just like that, there you go. The perfect main event for the perfect Halloween Havoc is Big Van Vader versus Cactus Jack. Well, there you go. My cherry-picked perfect Halloween Havoc. But what's yours? Let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to give this video a big like as well as subscribing to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, Dave knows. To show you how scared that is, we made a metal monster. Just kidding.